The Salem Witch Trials of 1692 stand as the most infamous and tragic episode of the American witch craze. The trials were a culmination of years of religious fervor, social tensions, and local rivalries in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Over 200 people were accused of witchcraft, 20 of whom were executed, including 19 by hanging and 1 by pressing. However, to fully understand how this hysteria took root in America, we must trace its origins back to Europe. The witch craze that swept across Europe from the 15th to the 18th centuries was characterized by fear of the supernatural, driven by religious and cultural anxieties. As European settlers arrived in the New World, they brought these fears with them. The first accusations of witchcraft in America can be traced back to these early colonies, where the same religious fervor and societal pressures that fueled the European witch hunts began to manifest in the new environment. The Puritans, who settled in New England, were particularly influenced by the European witch craze. The Puritans were a group of English Protestants in the 16th and 17th centuries who sought to purify the Church of England from what they saw as remnants of Roman Catholic practices. They believed that the Church of England needed further reform beyond what had been achieved during the English Reformation. They emphasized strict moral conduct and the authority of the Bible in guiding religious and personal life. Puritans advocated for a more personal and direct relationship with God, free from the elaborate rituals and hierarchy of the Anglican Church. Their religious beliefs also influenced their views on governance, society, and education, promoting a disciplined, pious, and community-oriented way of life. Many Puritans faced persecution for their beliefs in England, leading some to emigrate to the New World, particularly to the American colonies. The most famous of these migrations was the establishment of the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630, where the Puritans sought to create a society based on their religious principles. Their influence shaped much of the early social, religious, and political life in New England. Their strict religious beliefs and the hardships of colonial life created a fertile ground for witchcraft accusations, with the first recorded execution for witchcraft in New England occurring in 1647. Alice Young was born in 1615 in New Windsor, Berkshire, England, and later moved to Windsor, Connecticut during the 1630s. She is believed to have been the wife of John Young, who purchased a small piece of land in Windsor in 1641, sold it in 1649, and then disappeared from town records. The strongest evidence linking John Young as her husband comes from a physician's records. Alice had a daughter, Alice Young Beeman, who, around 30 years later, was accused of witchcraft in Springfield, Massachusetts. Alice Young Beeman married Simon Beeman, and they had children together. Like her mother, Alice Young Beeman also faced accusations of witchcraft, but defended herself, claiming slander. Although Alice Young had no son at the time of her witchcraft accusation, her husband was still alive, making it unlikely that she was accused solely due to potential inheritance. The specifics of her accusation remain unclear, and there are no records of her trial or the exact charges. In the year Alice was executed, the death rate surged due to a severe influenza outbreak affecting even the wealthy. Many prominent families lost members, prompting speculation that influential figures sought a scapegoat, leading to Alice's execution. She was likely hanged at Meeting House Square in Hartford, Connecticut, near the old jail. Massachusetts Bay Colony Governor John Winthrop recorded that one of Windsor was arraigned and executed at Hartford for a witch, and Windsor's second town clerk, Matthew Grant, confirmed her execution in a May 26, 1647 diary entry, stating, "Alice Young was hanged." Alice was about 32 years old at the time of her death. Following Alice Young was Mary Johnson, 1648 to 1650, also from Connecticut. Mary Johnson's case is notable for being the first recorded confession of witchcraft in the colony. She worked as a house servant and was accused of theft in 1648. Under extensive torture and interrogation, Johnson confessed to familiarity with the devil and claimed to have had relations with devils. Her execution was delayed because she was pregnant during her imprisonment in Hartford. Ultimately, she was executed on June 6, 1650. The Springfield Witch Trials of 1651, though less known than the infamous Salem Trials, hold a significant place in the history of early colonial America. These trials were among the earliest instances of witchcraft accusations in New England, occurring in the town of Springfield, Massachusetts. They serve as a precursor to the later, more widespread hysteria that gripped the region in the 1690s. Trials began in March 1651, centered around accusations made by Mary Parsons, the wife of Hugh Parsons, against her own husband. Mary claimed that Hugh was involved in witchcraft, accusing him of causing illness and death through supernatural means. Hugh Parsons was a brickmaker by trade, and his relationship with his wife had reportedly been strained, marked by domestic discord and mental instability. The situation escalated when other townspeople began supporting Mary's claims, adding their own suspicions about Hugh's behavior. They accused him of causing various misfortunes, including the death of cattle and the unexplained sickness of villagers. The community's fear of witchcraft was amplified by the sudden and growing nature of these events, which they interpreted as signs of the devil's work. Hugh Parsons was arrested and brought to trial. The proceedings were based on the English legal framework, which permitted the use of spectral evidence, testimony that the accused spirit or specter had been seen committing the alleged witchcraft. This type of evidence was notoriously unreliable, but was often used in witch trials due to the lack of concrete proof in cases of supposed witchcraft. During the trial, several witnesses testified against Hugh Parsons, recounting instances where they believed he had caused harm through supernatural means. Mary Parsons, however, began to waver in her accusations, possibly due to her own deteriorating mental state. At one point, she was even accused of witchcraft herself after confessing to having made a pact with the devil, though this claim was later dismissed as a result of her apparent insanity. Despite the lack of solid evidence, the jury found Hugh Parsons guilty of witchcraft. However, his sentence was unusual for the time. Rather than being executed, he was held in prison, likely due to doubts about the legitimacy of the evidence against him. His ultimate fate is unclear, as records suggest he may have died in prison or been released under uncertain circumstances. In the years that followed, other residents of Springfield also faced accusations of witchcraft, though the specifics of these cases are not as well documented. Such accusations often stemmed from personal conflicts, unexplained misfortunes, or the widespread belief in the supernatural. In these small, close-knit communities, hysteria often gripped people when unexplained events occurred, leading to accusations of witchcraft as a convenient explanation. While the Springfield witch trials were neither as infamous nor as widespread as those in Salem, they set a precedent for how colonial communities dealt with their fear of witchcraft. The hysteria in Salem began in January 1692, when two girls, Elizabeth Betty Parris and Abigail Williams, the daughter and niece of the Reverend Samuel Parris, began exhibiting strange behaviors. They contorted their bodies into unnatural positions, spoke in tongues, and claimed to see visions of spirits. Soon, other girls in the village began to exhibit similar symptoms. The local doctor was unable to diagnose any physical ailment, suggested that the girls were under the influence of witchcraft. This diagnosis resonated with the deeply religious Puritan community, and the girls, under pressure, began to accuse various local women of afflicting them. The first three women accused were Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. All three women were considered social outcasts. Tituba and Sarah Good were both poor, while Osborne was not. Osborne had not attended church in nearly 3 years due to a prolonged illness, and she was still dealing with legal issues involving the Putnam family. The accusations against Osborne were likely influenced by powerful suggestions from the Putnam family. The warrant for Sarah Osborne's arrest was issued on March 1, 1692. She was to be placed in the Boston jails for the duration of her examinations and trials, and she was sent to Boston along with Tituba and Sarah Good on March 7, 1692. During her examinations, she claimed innocence and denied involvement with evil spirits or harming the villagers. She neither confessed nor accused anyone else. This contrasts with Tituba's account, in which she confessed to witchcraft and implicated Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good as accomplices. Osborne died in jail on May 29, 1692, at the age of 49. On July 19, 1692, Sarah Good was executed on Gallows Hill in Salem, Massachusetts, along with 4 other women. Unlike Sarah Good, Tituba confessed to practicing witchcraft, likely under pressure or fear of execution. In her confession, she claimed she had been forced to do the devil's work and named others, including Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Tituba's confession, which included vivid descriptions of encounters with the devil and supernatural events, fueled the witchcraft hysteria. However, her confession spared her life. Tituba remained in jail for over a year, but was eventually released after the trials ended. Her fate after her release is largely unknown, with no records detailing what became of her. The initial accusations quickly escalated into a full-blown witch hunt, with more and more people being accused. The judicial process at the time was heavily biased against the accused. Spectral evidence or testimony that the spirit or specter of the accused was seen committing witchcraft was often accepted as valid proof. The courts also placed great weight on confessions, which were frequently extracted under duress or in the hope of a lighter sentence. One of the most notable figures in the Salem Witch Trials, and the first to be executed, was Bridget Bishop. Her trial, which lasted 8 days, marked the official start of the Salem Witchcraft Trials. Cotton Mather documented her trial in Wonders of the Invisible World. In his book, Mather recorded that several witnesses testified against Bishop, claiming that her spectral form would pinch, choke, or bite them. This apparition also allegedly threatened to drown one victim if she did not sign her name in a certain book. According to Mather, during the trial, whenever Bishop gazed upon one of her accusers, they would collapse, only to be revived by her touch. Ann Putnam testified that Bridget Bishop called the devil her god, while others, like Richard Coman, accused her of throttling them. Even Bishop's own husband claimed she praised the devil. These accusations fueled significant suspicion, but it was Ezekiel Cheever, a local official and possibly a constable in Salem, who played an administrative role in the prosecution process. John Putnam, a member of the influential Putnam family, was also deeply involved. The Putnams, one of the most prominent families in Salem, were key figures in the accusations and prosecutions during the trials. Together, Cheever and Putnam formally brought the complaint against Bishop, leading to her being charged with witchcraft. Cotton Mather later stated that the most compelling evidence against Bishop was the extensive lying she committed in court. She was sentenced to death and executed on June 10, 1692. Another significant case in the Salem witch trials is that of Rebecca Nurse, one of the most tragic cases of the entire period. Born in 1621, she was a respected elderly woman, a devout Christian, and a mother of 8. Despite her impeccable reputation, she became one of the many victims of the mass hysteria that swept through Salem in 1692. Rebecca was accused of witchcraft by her neighbors, the Putnam family, who were influential in the Salem village community. The initial accusations were largely based on long-standing disputes between the Nurse family and the Putnams, particularly over land. As the witch trials escalated, Rebecca's name was brought up by Ann Putnam Jr., one of the key accusers in the trials. Her trial was marked by drama and division. Many in the community, including some of the jurors, found it hard to believe that a woman of her stature and character could be guilty of witchcraft. In fact, she was initially found not guilty, but the verdict was challenged by the accusers. Under pressure, the jury reconsidered, and Rebecca was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death. Rebecca Nurse maintained her innocence throughout the trial, even as others around her confessed to witchcraft in hopes of saving their lives. Her calm demeanor and firm faith left a profound impact on those who witnessed her trial. Despite petitions from her family and many members of the community, Rebecca was executed on July 19, 1692, on what is now known as Gallows Hill. Her execution was one of the turning points in the Salem witch trials. The doubt and regret that followed her death began to shift public opinion against the trials, leading to their eventual end. While no one dared to oppose the accusations and the witch hysteria, one man and his wife stood against the trials, Giles Corey, along with his wife Martha. Giles Corey's story is one of the most harrowing and defiant cases in the Salem witch trials. Born in England around 1611, Corey was a prosperous farmer in Salem Village, known for his strong will and straightforward nature. His case became infamous not just for the accusation of witchcraft against him, but for the brutal and unique way he met his end. In 1692, as the witch trials swept through Salem, Giles Corey, along with his wife Martha, was accused of practicing witchcraft. Martha had been outspoken against the trials, which likely contributed to the suspicion against her. Giles, initially skeptical of the accusations against others, found himself entangled in the hysteria when his own wife was accused. Despite her protestations of innocence, Martha was arrested, and soon after, Giles was accused as well. Giles Corey's trial took a grim turn when he refused to enter a plea. At the time, English law required a plea to be entered before a trial could proceed. By refusing to plead, Corey was trying to prevent the court from confiscating his land, which would have been taken by the state if he had been found guilty, leaving his children with nothing. To force him to enter a plea, the court ordered that Corey undergo pressing, a form of torture where heavy stones were placed on his chest. For 2 days, Giles Corey endured in silence. When urged to plead, he famously responded, "More weight." His defiance was seen as an act of resistance against the unjust proceedings of the court, and he never uttered a plea. On September 19, 1692, Giles Corey died from the pressing, the only person in American history known to have been pressed to death by judicial order. As more people were accused, including respected community members, public confidence in the trials began to erode. The very fabric of the community was being torn apart by fear and suspicion, and a growing number of voices started to question the legitimacy of the trials. The turning point came in October 1692, when Governor William Phips, responding to the growing outcry, intervened in the proceedings. He took the significant step of prohibiting the use of spectral evidence, which had been the basis for most of the convictions. Recognizing the need for a more measured approach, Phips ordered the establishment of a new court, the Superior Court of Judicature, to handle the remaining cases. This new court operated under stricter guidelines, refusing to accept spectral evidence and emphasizing the need for tangible proof of witchcraft. As a result, many of the accused were acquitted, and the number of new accusations sharply declined. By early 1693, the momentum behind the witch trials had dissipated. In May of that year, Governor Phips issued a proclamation that effectively brought the trials to an end, releasing and pardoning those who were still imprisoned on witchcraft charges. The hysteria that had gripped Salem for over a year finally began to subside. The end of the Salem Witch Trials did not immediately erase the scars left on the community, but it marked the beginning of a period of reflection and remorse. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court declared a day of fasting and soul-searching to atone for the tragedy. In the years that followed, many of those involved in the trials, including judges and jurors, publicly expressed regret for their actions. In 1702, the trials were officially declared unlawful, and in 1711, the Massachusetts legislature passed a bill restoring the rights and reputations of the accused. The heirs of those who had been convicted were granted financial restitution. This dark chapter in American history ultimately led to greater awareness of the dangers of mass hysteria, the importance of due process, and the need to protect the innocent from unfounded accusations.